Is he your husband? That's what she whispered, not loud enough for anyone else to hear, just for me. The restaurant was warm and dim, the kind of place where the lights sit low over each table like secrets. A soft jazz song was playing. I remember the clink of ice in someone's glass, the smell of garlic butter and seared steak, and her breath, mint and something nervous. I looked up at her. She was standing too close to my chair, clutching her purse with both hands. Her nails were pale pink, chipped at the edges. She wasn't angry. She wasn't dramatic. She was afraid. I turned slowly to look at Aspen across from me, my husband of 27 years. He was laughing at something the waiter had just said, his hand wrapped around his wineglass. He hadn't noticed her, not yet. Yes, I said, my voice steady. He is. The woman swallowed, her eyes flickered to him, then back to me. I'm sorry, she whispered. I thought you should know. Know what? But she didn't finish the sentence. She just nodded once, almost apologetically, and walked back toward a table near the window. And that was the moment something inside me shifted. Not shattered, not exploded, shifted, like a floorboard bending under weight you didn't realize was there. I smiled at Aspen when he looked up at me. You okay? He asked. Of course, I said, and I meant it, because at that point I still believed I was okay. Before that night my life had been ordinary, comfortable, predictable. Aspen and I met when I was 23. I was working as a receptionist at a small insurance office. He walked in wearing a navy suit that didn't quite fit his shoulders, holding a stack of papers and looking slightly lost. He smiled at me like I was the only person in the building. That smile had carried us through decades. We built our life slowly, no grand gestures, no dramatic highs, just steady work and shared responsibility. 2 children, a mortgage, Sunday dinners at my mother's house while she was still alive. Aspen handled the finances. I handled the home. That wasn't something we discussed, it just happened. He was practical, quiet, reliable. He wasn't a man who surprised me, or so I thought. Our daughter Indy is 24 now. She lives 3 states away. Our son Marcus is finishing his last year of college. The house has been quieter lately, sometimes too quiet. That's why that dinner meant something to me. It was our anniversary, 27 years. Aspen had suggested the restaurant, said we should try something new. I remember teasing him about it. Look at you, I'd said that morning while buttering toast. Mr. Adventurous. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I noticed that, just barely. Lately there had been small things, late nights at work. His phone face down on the counter, a new cologne I hadn't bought him. But marriage is long, it stretches and bends. You don't question every little crack. You tell yourself you're being silly. You tell yourself trust means not peeking behind every door. That's what I told myself. Until a stranger leaned into my space and asked if the man I'd built my life with was really mine. Back at the table, Aspen reached for my hand. You're quiet, he said. Just tired, I replied. His thumb brushed against my wedding ring. It used to comfort me. That night it felt like a question. I glanced across the room. The woman was sitting alone. She hadn't ordered food, just a glass of water. She kept looking at us. No, at him. My heart began to thud, slow, heavy. Do you know her? I asked casually. Aspen followed my gaze. For a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, his jaw tightened. Then he shook his head. Number should I? The answer came too quickly. I smiled again, that practiced, polite smile women learn to wear when they don't want to disrupt the peace. Probably not, I said. Dinner continued. He talked about a new project at work. I nodded. I laughed in the right places, but the air had changed. When the check came, Aspen excused himself to use the restroom, and that's when she stood up again. She walked straight toward me. This time she didn't whisper. You deserve the truth, she said softly. My hands went cold. I don't know what you think you know, I replied carefully. Her eyes glistened. I've been seeing him for 8 months. The words didn't slam into me, they didn't knock me over. They settled like dust, slow and suffocating. I didn't know he was married, she continued. Not until tonight. He told me he was separated, that it was complicated. Separated, complicated, the language of cowards. I studied her face. She looked younger than me by at least 15 years. Early 30s, maybe, tired around the eyes. I found out 2 weeks ago, she said. I ended it, but when I saw you here tonight smiling, I couldn't just walk away. I should have felt rage, I should have screamed, but what I felt instead was clarity. A strange, quiet clarity. Thank you, I said. She looked surprised. That's all, she asked. What would you prefer? I replied gently. A scene? She lowered her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I believe you, I said, and I did, because guilt has a sound. And hers was real. Aspen returned just then. He froze when he saw her standing beside our table, everything in his face drained of color. And in that instant I knew, not because of what she said, but because of how he looked at me. Like he had already lost something, I stood up slowly. Aspen, I said calmly, why don't you sit down? His lips parted but no words came out. The restaurant noise continued around us. Glasses clinking, soft laughter, the world indifferent to the quiet implosion at table 12. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in 27 years I didn't recognize the man across from me, not because he was a stranger, but because he had chosen to become one, and that was the beginning, not of the end. But of the truth, Aspen didn't sit down, he stood there frozen between us like a boy caught doing something he couldn't explain away. The woman stepped back first. I've said what I needed to say, she murmured, her voice thin now. I won't bother you again. She didn't look at him, only at me, then she walked away, the door opened. A rush of cool night air slipped inside and she was gone. Aspen finally lowered himself into his chair. I can explain, he said, of course he could. Men always think they can explain betrayal like it's a scheduling error. I sat back down too, my hands were steady, which surprised me. Please do, I replied. His eyes darted toward the surrounding tables. A couple nearby were pretending not to watch. The waiter hesitated at the edge of the room, sensing something but not wanting to intrude. Aspen leaned closer. It's not what she made it sound like. That sentence, I had heard other women say it before, friends, cousins, women at church whispering over coffee. I never thought it would be mine. Then what is it? I asked. He rubbed his forehead. It was a mistake, it didn't mean anything. 8 months. 8 months isn't a mistake, it's a pattern. Did you tell her you were separated? I asked quietly. His silence answered first, then I might have said things were strained. Strained, the word tasted bitter. Our son was applying for internships, I said calmly. We were planning his graduation trip, we just repainted the kitchen together. His mouth opened but nothing came out. We weren't strained, Aspen, we were living. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment I saw panic, not remorse, panic. I was lonely, he said. I almost laughed. Lonely, I repeated. In the same house where I sleep beside you every night? It's not about proximity, he snapped, then immediately softened his tone. I mean, we've been distant. We've been aging, I corrected gently. There's a difference. He looked down at his hands. I didn't think it would go this far, but it already had. The waiter approached cautiously. Everything all right? Yes, I said before Aspen could speak. We're done here. I stood up. Aspen followed me outside. The night air was cooler than I expected. It smelled faintly of rain. In the parking lot under the yellow glow of a street lamp, we looked like any other couple leaving dinner. That was the strange part. Nothing visible had changed. Everything invisible had. Get in the car, he said quietly. No, I replied. He blinked. What do you mean? I mean I need a moment. He hesitated, then walked to the driver's side and leaned against the car. For 27 years this man had been my anchor, my routine, the steady rhythm of my days, and suddenly I realized something unsettling. I didn't actually know what he did with his loneliness. I walked a few steps away and called Indy. It was late, but she answered on the second ring. Mom, everything okay? Her voice, bright, familiar. I closed my eyes. Sweetheart, I said gently, I need you to listen carefully. I didn't cry. I told her exactly what happened. No embellishment, no hysteria, just facts. There was a long pause on the other end. Are you safe? She asked first. That's my girl. Yes. Do you want me to come home? No. Another pause. Dad's an idiot, she said softly. I almost smiled. Maybe, I replied, but this isn't about insults, it's about decisions. She was quiet again. What are you going to do? She asked. And that was the question I had been avoiding. I looked over at Aspen. He was staring at the ground. I don't know yet, I admitted. We drove home in silence. The house greeted us the way it always did, the porch light on. The faint scent of lavender from the diffuser I'd plugged in that morning, familiar, safe. I walked inside and removed my heels. Aspen closed the door behind us. Can we talk? He asked. We are talking, I said calmly. He ran a hand through his hair. I ended it. When? I asked. He hesitated. Last week. The lie hung there between us. She said she ended it, I replied. His face tightened. It was mutual. Of course it was. Did you love her? I asked. That question seemed to strike deeper than anything else. No, he said quickly, too quickly. It was just attention, something different. Something different. After 27 years, I had become ordinary, predictable, safe. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were still steady. "Does Marcus know?" I asked. His eyes widened. "Of course not." "Good," I said, "because I'd rather tell him myself than have him hear it from someone else." "You're not thinking clearly," he said. "I'm thinking very clearly." I took a slow sip of water. "You had 8 months to think about what you were doing. I've had 8 minutes. He flinched. "I never meant to hurt you. Intent is a comfort for the person who commits the act, not the one who absorbs it." "I believe you," I said softly. "But you did." He stepped closer. "Please don't throw everything away over this." "Everything?" I looked around the kitchen, the table we picked out together, the dent in the cabinet from when Marcus crashed his toy truck into it, the refrigerator covered in years of magnets and memories. "You threw something away," I said quietly. "Not me." He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. "Not tonight," I added. "I'm too tired for theatrics." "Where are you going to sleep?" he asked. "In my bed," I replied. "And me?" I met his eyes. "The guest room seems appropriate." For the first time, he looked small, not villainous, not monstrous, just small, and I realized something important in that moment. He wasn't evil, he was weak, and weakness can dismantle a life just as thoroughly as cruelty. That night, I lay awake listening to the unfamiliar silence between us. No steady breathing beside me, no warmth at my back, just space. At around 2 in the morning, I heard him walking downstairs. The creak of the third stair, it always creaks. Some habits don't change. I wondered if he was calling her, or deleting messages, or simply sitting alone in the dark, finally understanding the weight of what he'd done. I didn't go check. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and let the truth settle properly inside me. He hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He had rewritten our history, every late night at work, every distracted glance. Every moment I felt something was off and told myself I was imagining it. I wasn't imagining it. Women rarely are. Morning arrived without ceremony. I made coffee. Out of habit, I poured 2 cups. Then I stopped. I poured one down the sink. Aspen came into the kitchen looking older than he had the night before. "I barely slept," he said. I nodded. "I made an appointment with a counselor," he added quickly. "We can fix this." Fix, like a cracked tile. Like a leaky faucet. Some things aren't repairs, they're revelations. "I need time," I said. "How much?" he asked. "I don't know." He looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he sat down. "I love you," he said. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't immediately say it back. Not because I didn't feel something, but because love, I realized, isn't just a feeling, it's behavior. And his behavior had told a different story. I finished my coffee and stood up. "I'm going to call a lawyer," I said evenly. His head snapped up. "Divorce? Information," I corrected. "I deserve information." He stared at me as if seeing a version of me he hadn't expected. Calm, measured, not screaming, not collapsing, just thinking. "You're overreacting," he said quietly. "No," I replied, "I'm responding." And that's when I understood something else. The woman at the restaurant didn't change everything. She revealed what had already changed, and now I had to decide who I wanted to be inside this new truth. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and lemon polish. I remember that detail clearly. Maybe because when your life begins to fracture, your mind clings to ordinary things. Textures, smells, the sound of a clock ticking steadily on the wall. Her name was Patricia Klein, mid-50s. Gray streak in her hair that looked intentional, sharp eyes but kind. She didn't react dramatically when I explained why I was there. She simply nodded and said, "Start from the beginning." So I did. I told her about the restaurant, the woman, the 8 months. The lie about being separated. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just laid it out like evidence on a table. Patricia folded her hands. "Do you want to divorce him?" It was the first time someone had asked me directly. I stared at the bookshelf behind her head, neatly arranged case files, years of other people's unravelings. "I don't know," I said honestly. "That's okay," she replied. "This meeting is about clarity, not commitment." Clarity, that word felt important. She walked me through the basics, assets, retirement accounts. The house, what would happen if I stayed? What would happen if I left? Aspen had always handled the finances. I trusted him, but trust and transparency aren't the same thing. When she asked if I had access to our accounts, I hesitated. "I have passwords," I said. "But I've never really examined them." She gave me a look that wasn't judgmental, just factual. "Now would be a good time." I left her office with a folder tucked under my arm and something steadier inside my chest, not anger, information. At home, Aspen was waiting in the kitchen. He stood when I walked in. "Where were you?" he asked, with a lawyer. The words seemed to echo against the cabinets. His shoulders sagged. "You didn't even tell me. I don't need permission to understand my options." His jaw tightened. "So that's it, 27 years and you run to a lawyer after one mistake?" "One mistake." I set the folder down on the counter. "Aspen," I said gently, 8 months is not a typo. He exhaled sharply. "I told you it's over." "Because she found out," I replied quietly. That shut him up. He looked away first. "I was going to tell you," he muttered. "When?" I asked. "On our 30th anniversary," he rubbed his face. I was confused. I studied him. This man who used to bring me coffee in bed on Sundays, who cried when Indy left for college, who held my hand at my mother's funeral. How does someone split themselves like that? "I need full access to everything," I said calmly. "All accounts, credit cards, retirement funds." "You think I've been hiding money now?" he snapped. "I think I don't know what I don't know." That seemed to land. For a moment he looked almost ashamed. "I'll print everything," he said quietly, and to his credit he did. That afternoon he laid out statements across the dining room table like a reluctant confession. I sat across from him. We went through them together. There were hotel charges, not many, but enough. A jewelry purchase I'd never received. Dinner receipts from places we had never been. My heart didn't race, it sank steadily like something lowering into deep water. "I'm sorry," he said again. The words were starting to sound thin. "Why her?" I asked suddenly. He blinked. "What? Why her?" He stared at the table. "She laughed at my jokes," he said finally. I almost smiled. "I've laughed at your jokes for 27 years. It's different," he muttered. "How?" He hesitated. "She saw me differently. There it was, not love, validation." "You felt invisible," I said. He looked up, surprised. "Yes." I nodded slowly. "So you made me invisible instead?" The room went quiet because that's what affairs really are, a transfer of visibility. That evening Marcus called. He was excited about an internship interview. His voice was full of plans. I listened carefully, memorizing the rhythm of his optimism. Halfway through the call, he paused. "Mom, you okay? You sound different." I swallowed. "Your father and I are working through something," I said carefully. He went silent. "What kind of something?" I didn't want to poison his view of his father, not yet. "Adult something," I said softly. "We'll talk when you come home next month." He didn't press, but I heard the worry. After I hung up, I stood in the hallway for a long time. Families are fragile ecosystems. One shift affects everyone. Over the next week, Aspen tried. He cooked dinner twice, burned the salmon once. He started leaving his phone face up on the counter. He sent me long texts from upstairs apologizing even though we were in the same house. But effort, when it's reactive, feels different than effort that's organic. I watched him closely, not obsessively, just consciously, and I began noticing things I hadn't before. The way he avoided certain topics. The way he flinched when his phone buzzed even though he claimed he'd blocked her. The way guilt makes a person overly attentive. One night I asked him something simple. "Do you miss her?" He froze. "That's not fair," he said. "It's honest." He stared at the floor. "I miss how I felt," he admitted quietly. That answer hurt more than if he'd said yes. Because it wasn't about her. It was about him. About chasing a version of himself that didn't require responsibility. A week later, something unexpected happened. I received an email, no subject line, just a short message. "I'm not trying to interfere, I just thought you should know." He reached out again. I didn't respond. It was her. Attached was a screenshot. Aspen's name, a message sent 2 nights prior. "Can we talk?" My hands went cold. 2 nights prior, he had been sitting across from me at dinner, telling me he wanted to rebuild. I walked downstairs. He was watching television. "Did you contact her?" I asked calmly. He didn't look up right away, then he did. "No." I placed my phone on the coffee table in front of him, his face drained of color. "It wasn't like that," he stammered. "What was it like?" I asked. "I just wanted closure." I laughed softly. Closure is what people seek after they're done. Not while they're trying to fix something. He stood up, pacing. "I needed to know she wouldn't cause problems." "She didn't," I replied. "You did." The room felt smaller. "You said it was over," I continued. "You said it ended." It did. "Then why are you knocking on a closed door?" He had no answer. And in that silence, something inside me solidified. It wasn't rage, it was understanding. He wasn't done. not really, not emotionally. And I couldn't compete with nostalgia for a version of him that never had to grow up. I think you should stay somewhere else for a while, I said quietly. He stared at me. You're kicking me out? I'm asking for space. This is my house too. Yes, I agreed, but I need air. For the first time since the restaurant, his frustration turned sharp. You're acting like I murdered someone. No, I said calmly. You fractured trust, and trust doesn't heal under pressure. He ran a hand through his hair. Where am I supposed to go? You have friends. He hesitated, then, surprisingly, he nodded. I'll pack a bag. I watched him walk upstairs. And as I stood there in the living room, alone in a house that suddenly felt larger, I realized something I hadn't fully acknowledged. The woman at the restaurant hadn't destroyed my marriage. She had handed me a mirror. And now I was finally seeing what had been quietly eroding beneath the surface. The question wasn't whether he had betrayed me. The question was whether I could live with the version of him that did. Aspen packed a single suitcase. It was the navy one we used for weekend trips. The one with the slightly broken zipper that he always promised to fix. I stood at the bottom of the stairs while he moved around upstairs, drawers opening, closing, the soft thud of shoes being placed inside. 27 years of shared space reduced to one suitcase. When he came down, he looked smaller somehow, less certain. I'll stay at Mark S., he said. Mark, his golf buddy, divorced twice. I nodded. Call Marcus like you normally would, I added. Don't disappear on the kids. I won't, he said quickly. He hesitated near the door. I never wanted this, he murmured. I studied him carefully. But you chose it, I replied. He swallowed, and then he left. The door closed with a quiet click, no slamming, no shouting, just absence. The first night alone was the strangest. The house wasn't silent. Refrigerators hum, pipes shift, wood settles, but there was a difference between natural sounds and shared breathing. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I thought I would cry. I didn't. Instead, I felt alert, aware. Like my body had been waiting for something to confirm what my instincts already suspected. Around midnight, my phone buzzed, a text from Aspen. I'm sorry, I love you, please don't give up on us. I placed the phone face down on the nightstand, not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. Love is easy to declare in text messages, it's harder to protect in action. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat at the dining room table and paid attention to the bills myself, not just glancing at totals. Actually reading them, examining patterns. There were no secret accounts, no hidden mortgages, but there was something else. A credit card I didn't recognize. The charges weren't extravagant. Gas stations, a few small restaurants, a boutique hotel charge from 3 months ago. When I confronted him later that afternoon over the phone, he sighed heavily. It was just easier, he said. Easier than what? I asked. Than mixing everything with our main accounts. He didn't even hear himself, our main accounts. As if his affair required its own financial lane, I closed my eyes. You compartmentalized me, I said softly. It wasn't about you. It always is, I replied. 3 days later, Marcus came home unexpectedly. He didn't warn us. He just walked in through the front door with his backpack slung over one shoulder. Surprise, he called out. I was in the kitchen. For a split second, I considered pretending everything was fine, but children, even grown ones, sense fractures. He looked around. Where's Dad? I wiped my hands on a dish towel. He's staying with a friend for a while. Marcus frowned. Why? I met his eyes, and I made a decision in that moment. I would not lie to protect a grown man from the consequences of his choices. Your father had a relationship with someone else, I said calmly. The words hung heavy in the air. Marcus didn't speak for several seconds. You mean like an affair? He asked quietly. Yes. He blinked, then his jaw tightened. How long? 8 months. His backpack slid off his shoulder onto the floor. Are you serious? Yes. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. I knew something was off, he muttered. He was weird at Thanksgiving. I remembered that. Aspen stepping outside to take a call. Marcus stopped pacing and looked at me. Are you divorcing him? I haven't decided. Marcus' eyes softened. Mom, you don't deserve that. I smiled gently. No one does, I said. He pulled me into a hug, and that's when I cried, not for Aspen. For the ripple effect. For the way betrayal leaks into the spaces children stand in. Later that evening, Marcus insisted on calling his father. I didn't stop him. I sat in the living room and listened to muffled voices from the backyard. There was no yelling, just sharp disappointment. When Marcus came back inside, his face looked older. He said it was complicated, Marcus said flatly. It isn't, I replied softly. He nodded. I told him he needs to figure out what kind of man he wants to be. I looked at my son and saw the quiet strength I had hoped he inherited. A week passed, then two, Aspen asked to meet for coffee, public place, neutral ground. I agreed. We chose a small cafe near the park. He arrived early. He looked tired, unshaven. I miss home, he said immediately. I'm sure you do, I replied. He leaned forward. I ended it completely. I blocked her number. I deleted everything. You already said that once. He winced. I mean it this time. I stirred my coffee slowly. Why did you message her again? I asked. He hesitated. I needed to feel like I still had control. There it was again, not love, control. You risked your marriage to feel in control? I asked quietly. He looked ashamed. When you say it like that. That's how it is. He stared at his cup. I was afraid of getting older, he admitted finally, afraid of becoming irrelevant. And sleeping with someone younger fixed that? I asked gently. For a moment, he said, honesty at least. I studied his face. I could see the man I loved in there, but I could also see the man who made deliberate choices without thinking of me. Do you regret it? I asked. Yes. Or do you regret getting caught? He looked up sharply. That's not fair. It's necessary. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I regret hurting you, he said carefully, not the affair, the consequence. I nodded slowly. I need more than regret, I said. What do you need? Accountability, transparency, and time. He exhaled. How much time? I don't know. Silence settled between us. Outside, children were playing near the fountain. A dog barked in the distance. Life continuing, unbothered. Do you still love me? He asked quietly. I held his gaze. Yes, I said honestly. His shoulders relaxed slightly. But love isn't enough right now. And that was the truth I had finally accepted. Love without trust is anxiety. Love without respect is erosion. He reached across the table but stopped short of touching my hand. I'll do whatever it takes, he said. I believed he meant that, but intention and endurance are different things. Then start by understanding something, I said calmly. You didn't just step outside our marriage, you stepped outside our reality. You made me doubt my instincts. He looked confused. What do you mean? I sensed something was wrong, I explained, and I told myself I was being paranoid. You made me question my own perception. His face shifted. That wasn't my goal, it was the effect. He nodded slowly. I didn't realize that. I know, I said softly, that was the problem. When I walked home from the cafe, I felt both heavier and lighter. He was remorseful. He was trying, but remorse doesn't rewind time, and trust doesn't regenerate on demand. That evening I stood in the kitchen and looked around at the life we had built. Photographs, milestones, quiet routines. I realized something profound. The woman at the restaurant had asked, "Is he your husband?" But the better question now was, is this still my marriage? And I didn't have the answer yet. The house felt different once Aspen's absence settled into something routine. At first, every quiet corner echoed with memory, the indentation on his side of the mattress. The mug he always used, navy blue with a chipped handle. The faint scent of his aftershave lingering in the hallway. But after 3 weeks, the silence stopped feeling sharp. It started feeling honest. I woke up one morning and realized I had slept through the night. No listening for footsteps. No wondering if his phone would buzz, just sleep. That frightened me more than anything else. Because it meant my body had begun adjusting to life without him beside me. Aspen kept calling, not obsessively, but consistently. He'd ask about Marcus, about the house, about whether I'd thought more about us. I answered politely, calmly, but I didn't reassure him. One evening, he asked to come by and pick up more clothes. I agreed. Marcus was in his room when Aspen arrived. I stayed in the kitchen. I heard them talking upstairs, not arguing, not laughing. Just the low murmur of two men trying to figure out where they stood with each other. When Aspen came down carrying another small bag, he paused near the doorway. "Can we talk for a minute?" he asked. I nodded. We sat at the dining table. The same table where he had laid out the bank statements. "I started therapy," he said. I blinked. "Alone? Yes, that surprised me. I realized something," he continued. "I've spent most of my life trying to avoid feeling inadequate." I waited. "My father cheated on my mother," he said quietly. "I hated him for it. I swore I'd never be that man." The air shifted. "And yet," I prompted gently. "And yet I repeated it," he finished. There it was, the inheritance of unresolved pain. "I'm not telling you this as an excuse," he said quickly, "just context." I studied him. Context doesn't erase damage, but it explains behavior. "Are you trying to become different?" I asked softly, "or just trying to get me back?" He didn't answer immediately. That silence mattered. "I want to be different," he said finally, "whether you stay or not." That was the first honest thing he'd said that didn't revolve around saving the marriage, and for a moment, just a moment, I felt something shift again, not forgiveness, but recognition. Growth, if it was real, would take time, and effort without audience. 2 days later, I ran into someone unexpected. I was at the grocery store, standing in the produce aisle examining tomatoes. "Hi," a soft voice said. I turned. It was her, the woman from the restaurant. Up close, she looked more tired than I remembered. No makeup this time, dark circles under her eyes. "I wasn't sure if you'd recognize me," she said carefully. "I do," I replied. We stood awkwardly beside a stack of oranges. "I'm not trying to intrude," she added quickly. I wanted to say something in person." I waited. "I didn't know," she said again. "About you, about your family." "I believe you," I replied. She looked relieved. "I've been in therapy too," she continued. "I have a pattern of choosing unavailable men." The honesty startled me. "I'm not proud of it," she said, "but I'm trying to understand why I keep accepting less than I deserve." For a moment, I saw her not as an enemy, but as another woman navigating her own broken patterns. "Did he contact you again?" I asked quietly. She nodded. "Once." I didn't respond. I held her gaze. "Thank you," she exhaled. "I'm sorry for the pain I caused you." "You didn't cause it," I said gently. "You revealed it." Her eyes filled slightly. "I hope you find peace," she whispered. "You too," I replied. And then we both reached for tomatoes at the same time, life continuing in strange symmetry. That night I told Aspen about the encounter. He listened quietly. "I won't contact her again," he said. "I know," I replied. He looked surprised. "You know?" "Yes," I said, "because if you do, you lose me completely." It wasn't a threat, it was a boundary. He nodded slowly. "I understand." Weeks turned into a month, then 2. Marcus returned to school. The house grew quiet again. Aspen continued therapy. He sent me notes occasionally, reflections, realizations. Some of them felt genuine, others felt rehearsed. I began seeing a counselor myself, not because I was broken, but because I wanted clarity inside my own choices. One afternoon, my counselor asked me something simple. "If you stay," she said, "what are you choosing?" "History," I replied. "And if you leave?" "Unknown." She nodded. "Which scares you more?" I didn't answer right away. The truth was uncomfortable. The unknown didn't scare me. Losing the version of my life I had invested decades into, that scared me, but staying purely because of investment is not love, it's fear. Aspen asked to meet again. This time I invited him to the house. Neutral ground had served its purpose. Now it was time to confront reality where it lived. He stood in the doorway for a moment when he arrived, like a guest. We sat in the living room, the late afternoon light filtered through the curtains. "I've been thinking," he began. "So have I replied. "I know I broke something," he said, "but I want the chance to rebuild it." "Rebuilding requires demolition," I said calmly. He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "We can't pretend this is the same marriage. That version is gone." He absorbed that. "So what now?" I took a slow breath. "Now you answer something honestly." "Okay, if I had never found out," I said, "would you have stopped?" His face went still. That question had been waiting. He looked down at his hands. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. And that honesty, painful as it was, mattered more than a rehearsed promise. I nodded slowly. "That's what I needed to hear." "You're not angry?" he asked. "I am," I said softly, "but I'm more interested in truth than comfort." He leaned back, exhaling. "I hate that I didn't stop on my own," he whispered. "So do I replied. The room fell silent, and in that silence I realized something unexpected. This wasn't about punishing him. It was about deciding whether I could live beside the man he truly was, not the one I had imagined. That night after he left, I walked through the house slowly, touching surfaces, tracing memories. I stood in front of our wedding photo. 2 young people smiling with certainty. We thought love was immunity. It is. Love is maintenance, and maintenance requires attention. The woman at the restaurant had asked if he was my husband. Technically, yes, but emotionally, that was still under evaluation. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to sit inside that uncertainty. Because clarity, even painful clarity, is a form of strength. It was Indy who asked the question I had been avoiding. "Mom," she said over the phone one Sunday afternoon, "if this had happened to me, what would you tell me to do?" I was standing at the kitchen sink watching rain streak down the window. "I would tell you not to rush," I said carefully. "That's not what I'm asking." I smiled faintly. "I know." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you still feel safe with him?" she asked. Safe. That word settled in my chest. Safety isn't about physical harm, it's about emotional steadiness, predictability. Knowing the person beside you won't quietly dismantle your reality. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "That's your answer," she said softly. After we hung up, I stood there thinking about safety. When Aspen and I first married, safety meant financial stability, a home, a plan. Now safety meant honesty, even when honesty was uncomfortable. Aspen continued therapy. He sent me an email one evening, not a text this time. It was long, thoughtful. He wrote about his fear of aging, about feeling invisible at work as younger employees were promoted, about watching me move through motherhood with competence and quiet strength while he felt stagnant. "I didn't know how to tell you I felt small," he wrote, "so I tried to feel big somewhere else." I read that line 3 times. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it explained something fundamental. Some people cheat for passion, others cheat for validation. He had cheated to escape his own insecurity. That realization didn't fix anything, but it shifted the narrative away from romance and toward immaturity. A few days later, I agreed to attend one couple's therapy session with him, just one. The therapist's office was warm with neutral walls and soft lighting. There were 2 chairs angled slightly toward each other, intentional positioning. Aspen looked nervous. I felt calm. The therapist, Dr. Raymond, asked him to describe the affair without minimizing it. "I betrayed my wife," Aspen said, "not I made a mistake. Not I got carried away." He said betrayed, that mattered. Dr. Raymond turned to me. "What did that betrayal cost you?" he asked. I didn't answer immediately. "It cost me my certainty," I said finally. "It cost me the feeling that I knew my own life." Aspen's eyes flickered toward me. "I thought I knew my husband," I continued. "Now I'm realizing I knew the version of him he chose to show me." The room went quiet. Dr. Raymond nodded. "Trust is not rebuilt through promises," he said gently. "It's rebuilt through consistency over time." There it was again. Aspen reached for my hand during the session. This time I let him, not because everything was forgiven, but because I was observing, testing, not his affection, his endurance. When the session ended, Aspen looked hopeful. "See?" he said quietly as we stepped outside. "We can work through this." I looked at him carefully. "Working through it means you accept that I might still decide to leave." His expression faltered. "I know," he said, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Hope, I realized, can sometimes be selfish. He hoped for restoration. I hoped for clarity. Those are not always the same thing. That night I did something unexpected. I took off my wedding ring, not dramatically, not in anger. I simply slid it off and placed it in the small ceramic dish on my nightstand. My finger felt lighter, exposed. When Aspen noticed during our next meeting, his face tightened. "You're not wearing it," he said quietly. "I'm not pretending," I replied. He swallowed. "Does that mean?" "It means I need honesty more than symbolism." He nodded slowly. "I deserve that." The real turning point didn't come from therapy or arguments or even reflection. It came from something small. Aspen and I had agreed to meet for dinner again, this time to see how it felt. Not an anniversary, not a celebration, just dinner. We chose a quiet place near the river. When we sat down, I watched him carefully. He kept his phone on the table, face up, a deliberate gesture. Halfway through the meal, a message notification popped up. He glanced at it briefly. Then he turned the phone slightly so I could see. It was from Mark, nothing suspicious, but that wasn't what struck me. What struck me was the instinctive transparency. He didn't hide it. He didn't shield the screen. He simply existed openly. It was a small moment. But healing is built from small moments. Later, as we walked along the riverbank, he stopped suddenly. "I need to tell you something," he said. I braced myself. When she ended it, he began, "I felt angry at her, not because I loved her, but because she removed the fantasy." I listened. "She forced me to see what I was doing," he continued, "and I hated her for it." I nodded slowly. "That's why you texted her again," I said. "Yes, to regain control." "Yes." The honesty was uncomfortable but clean. "And now?" I asked. Now I'm embarrassed, he admitted. Not because you know, but because I know who I became. That was new, shame rooted in self-awareness, not exposure. We stood there quietly for a while, watching the water move under the bridge. Do you want to come home? I asked suddenly. His head snapped toward me. Yes, he said immediately. That's not what I asked. He blinked. Then what did you ask? I asked if you want to come home, knowing it won't be the same. He looked at the river. I don't want the old version, he said carefully. I want something honest, even if it's harder. I studied him, and for the first time since the restaurant, I felt something that wasn't grief or suspicion. It was possibility, not certainty, but possibility. When he moved back in 2 weeks later, it wasn't triumphant. There were no declarations, no grand gestures. He carried his suitcase upstairs quietly. That night he slept on his side of the bed, but there was space between us. Intentional space. Trust rebuilding is not dramatic, it's quiet, awkward, deliberate, and as I lay there in the dark, I realized something important. The woman at the restaurant had not ruined my life. She had disrupted an illusion, and sometimes illusion must be broken for truth to breathe. When Aspen moved back in, the house did not sigh with relief. It adjusted, like a body accommodating an old injury that still aches in certain weather. He was careful, almost overly so. He asked before touching me, asked before making plans, asked before speaking about the future. At first I resented that hesitancy. It felt unnatural, formal. Then I understood something. He wasn't walking on eggshells, he was learning to walk without assumption, and that mattered. We established rules, not dramatic ones, simple, unglamorous agreements. Phones remained face up. Passwords were shared openly, not as surveillance but as transparency. Weekly therapy continued. And once a week, we sat at the dining table and talked without distraction. No television, no phones, no avoidance. The first few conversations were stiff. We talked about practical things, bills, Marcus's classes, Indy's upcoming visit. But eventually we began talking about what we hadn't said for years. I felt like you didn't need me anymore, Aspen admitted one evening. I looked at him carefully. I needed you, I said. I just didn't need rescuing. He nodded slowly. I confused being needed with being valued. That distinction felt important. I realized that somewhere along the way we had stopped articulating appreciation. We had functioned well, efficiently, reliably, but efficiency is not intimacy. And routine, while comforting, can quietly replace curiosity. That doesn't excuse betrayal, but it explains how distance can grow without noise. Indy came home for a long weekend in early spring. She hugged her father, but there was caution in her posture, not hostility, just awareness. We had told her he was back home. She accepted it without drama. But during a quiet moment in the kitchen, she turned to me and asked softly, "Are you okay with this?" I thought about it. "I'm not okay with what happened," I said, "but I'm choosing to see what happens next." She studied my face. "Is that forgiveness?" She asked. "Not yet," I replied. "It's observation." She nodded. Later that evening, I watched Aspen and Indy talk in the backyard. He looked humbled, not defensive, and I realized something else. Consequences don't always look like divorce. Sometimes they look like permanent humility. The true public consequence came unexpectedly. A neighbor, Susan from 2 houses down, stopped me while I was watering the front plants. "I heard Aspen's been staying with Mark," she said casually. "Small towns thrive on incomplete information." "Yes," I replied evenly, "he was." She tilted her head. "Everything all right?" There was a time when I would have smiled and dismissed it, protected the image. Instead, I met her gaze calmly. "We had some issues," I said. "We're working through them." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Honesty, even vague honesty, has a way of disarming gossip. "Oh," she said, shifting awkwardly. "Well, marriage is hard." "Yes," I replied gently, "it is." She didn't press further, and I felt something powerful in that moment. I was no longer managing appearances. I was managing truth. Weeks turned into months. There were good days, easy laughter, shared meals, a sense of rebuilding. There were also hard days, moments when a random memory would surface and sting, a hotel receipt, an unfamiliar perfume sent in imagination. Trust doesn't heal in a straight line, it wavers. One evening, while folding laundry, I found the navy shirt Aspen had worn the night of our anniversary. The restaurant night. I held it for a long time. That fabric had sat across from me while another woman watched from the corner of the room. I walked downstairs. He was reading in the living room. I found this, I said quietly, holding up the shirt. His face changed immediately. I remember, he said. I do too, I replied. We stood there in silence. Then he said something I hadn't expected. I wish I could erase that night for you. I shook my head gently. No, I said, because that night forced us to confront something real. He looked surprised. You're not angry right now, he observed. I was, I said softly, but anger is heavy to carry forever. I sat beside him. What I'm trying to understand, I continued, is whether I can trust not just your behavior but your growth. He listened carefully. I don't want to monitor you for the rest of my life, I said. I don't want to live suspiciously. You won't have to, he replied quietly. That's not a promise you can make, I said gently. That's a standard you have to live. He nodded. I know, and for the first time I believed that he did. The final shift came one quiet Sunday morning. We were sitting at the kitchen table, sunlight pouring through the window. Aspen was reading the newspaper. I was drinking coffee, ordinary, peaceful. He looked up suddenly. I've been thinking about something, he said. I waited. If you had left, he continued, I would have deserved it. There was no defensiveness in his voice, just acceptance. And, I prompted softly, and I'm grateful you didn't rush, he said. Not because I escaped consequences, but because it forced me to confront myself. I studied him. You understand that staying wasn't weakness, I said. Yes, he replied immediately. It was strength. That mattered because reconciliation when chosen freely is not surrender, it is discernment. I reached for my coffee. I'm still deciding, I reminded him gently. He smiled faintly. I know, but something inside me had already begun settling. Not back into the old marriage, into something quieter, more aware, less naive. The woman at the restaurant had asked if he was my husband. And now, months later, I realized the better question was this: is he becoming the man I can respect, not just love? Not just history, respect. And slowly, not perfectly, the answer was leaning toward yes.